Well, it is about 7:05 according to both clocks, so I think I will call this meeting to order. We have one more member who might come. Good evening. This is a meeting of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission. It's just after 7 p.m. on Tuesday, September 20, and we'll start with a roll call.
Brandon Bowersox.
Present.
Gary Zico.
Here.
Michelle Guerra.
Here.
Audrey Ishii. Morgan Johnston.
Here.
Susan Jones.
Right here.
Brian Lake.
Here.
Brock Rosenshine. Nadine Schmidt.
Here.
Ray Spooner. Brad Bennett.
Here.
Thanks.
Okay, great. Does somebody want to make a motion to approve tonight's agenda, unless there are any suggested changes? Gary?
Yeah, I just wanted to know if we could briefly discuss whether this commission wants to have some input on the roundabout issue.
Yeah, maybe we could have like a future meeting topics discussion added on at the very end. So we could do the business items tonight and then talk about roundabouts. And there might have been one other that someone emailed me about too, a topic that we could work on for a future meeting. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
If we add that as
That's fine.
an item at the end? Any other suggested changes?
I would move to approve it with that amendment.
Okay, that's a motion by Morgan. Does anyone want to second that?
I'll second it.
Okay, a race to second it. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that carries. So we will proceed with that agenda and the one item added. We have approval of minutes from two prior meetings that went out in the packet. There was an April 19th meeting and a July 19th meeting. So we could have a motion to approve both of those together, or any changes or corrections if anyone had any. Gary?
Yeah, I'll move to approve both sets of minutes.
Okay, a motion by Gary, seconded by Sue. Were there any changes? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Next tonight, public input. Was anyone here in the audience here to speak to the commission? You're welcome to come up and speak for 5 minutes about any pedestrian bicycle issue. Okay. Okay, next time though, I'm counting on you. I do have one brief announcement under public input. I got a letter from our member Brock Rosenshine. Just last night I read it, saying that he wants to resign from the commission. He has other things going on, but that he really was glad to have served and glad about all the progress that's been made on bike and ped issues. He hopes we work more on ped issues specifically, which I totally agree. And he wanted to pass on a message that he hopes that we remember. Something he was passionate about was that asphalt paths are really great for joggers, for pedestrians, more so than concrete in terms of sort of being a kind of softer surface. So that was something I know he raised here, and he wanted us to make sure we don't forget. So I appreciate his service, and I think that means now we have two open spots on the commission. So we were just talking, maybe we can advertise, and I think especially getting some pedestrian advocates, because we have a lot of great bike folks, myself included, but it'd be great to get some of the ped advocates too. So if you know anybody who's interested in serving on the commission, let Teresa know, and she will also be publicly advertising it. The mayor's office helps advertise for those, and it's a very simple application if you know someone who wants to serve.
Here's a question.
Gary?
How does that affect the quorum, if at all?
We would have to check. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think our quorum would still be that we need something like 5 people to hold a meeting or to make a decision.
So that'll be harder with 2 slots gone. It's
Yeah.
not a percentage. It's not a...
It may just be a majority of those members currently serving on the commission
Okay.
to make a vote and to take some business action.
Uh-huh.
But I don't remember if our quorum is written to be a certain number, a certain head count or not. So we'd have to check, and it might be worth going back and checking, especially if we're down 2 seats. Right?
As a rule, it's I think in Robert's rules it's a little over it's 51% or 1 over 50%. However, it's my crusade in life to get rid of the quorum rule. that the hands of those who show up is tied by the hands of the people who don't show up. So if they're ever going to change our rules, let's get rid of the quorum rule.
Okay, very well. Any other comments?
I just have a question about the opening. Would
Yeah.
it be okay to, rather than just try to think of people who might be interested, post an announcement? For instance, we have an employee wellness newsletter that goes out 6 times a year, and one will be going out in the next couple weeks. I could put an announcement that these positions are available, but that means it's going out to
Yeah.
thousands of people. Is that okay to do that?
Yeah, I would
Okay.
say so, and that maybe, maybe Teresa, this is something you could help us work on. We should get some official language. Like I think everybody must be an Urbana resident to be eligible to be appointed because it's an Urbana City Commission. So we could like check on whether
Yeah.
there's any of those important.
I mean, I could give you my email and you could send me suggested verbiage, or I could write up a little blurb and send it to you for approval. I mean, either way is fine with me.
We've got the application and all that information on the website, so we can look that up and then
Okay.
email it to you, because I'm gonna put that on, have Jason make it a slide.
Okay. Okay, that would be great. We have a walking listserv too, which doesn't have nearly as many people on it, but those are people who have specifically indicated interest in walking, so I could send something out specifically to them too.
That's great.
Okay.
Okay, wonderful. Any other public input? Last chance. Okay, then we will start in on tonight's business. Under new business, the first item is the Very Small Starts Grant, the recommendation about dedicated bus bike lanes for Green Street between Wright and Lincoln. And Rebecca Bird is here to present this item.
So we talked about this at the joint session with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Commission and the Plan Commission, but not all of you were able to attend that joint meeting. And at the meeting, it seemed that the BPAC members were supportive of the idea. And so tonight, we just really want to confirm that and get an endorsement from BPAC. So this is a grant application that the City of Urbana is working together with the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District, the City of Champaign, and the university for. It would improve the infrastructure connecting the university campus with the downtown in both Urbana and Champaign. And the MTD is spearheading the effort, and they will be submitting the grant application on behalf of the participating agencies. So this grant, it's something like a $50 million grant, and there are many different pieces of it, and all of those pieces are in compliance with adopted Urbana plans other than one piece, and so that's the piece we want to talk about. And that is a recommendation for Green Street between Lincoln Avenue and between Wright Street and Lincoln Avenue. The Urbana Bicycle Master Plan identifies bicycle lanes on that piece of Green Street. And this grant application includes a dedicated bus-bike lane instead of just bicycle lanes. And that really came from a recommendation from a study that was commissioned by the MTD looking at bus and bicycle and pedestrian hotspots on campus. And it was their recommendation for this dedicated bus-bike lane on Green Street. And so as you did earlier get, for the joint meeting, you did get just before the meeting, these images of examples of dedicated bus-bike lanes. So here, this first picture is from England. You can see that's a bus-bike lane. Oh, my cursor disappears over the picture. But here, where the green is, that's a dedicated bus-bike lane. And there's one from Portland, Oregon. Another one. Philadelphia. So you can see here this sign up here, buses and bikes only in the right lane. Here's one in Chicago, Milwaukee Avenue. I think that is the same. That's also Milwaukee Avenue in Chicago. And that's it. So this is, we discussed the reasons for this really in this section of Green Street. Buses are going to be in the right-hand lane, regardless. And so by having a bike lane, the buses are going to have to be pulling across the bike lane for their stops. So dedicating the lane to be shared between buses and bikes simply, in my view, it actually, it tells both the bus and the bicycle that both of them are in the same place and, be cognizant of each other. The lane is not wide enough really for a bicycle to go round a bus, I don't think, unless you could move into the next travel lane. But it would, it also wouldn't be wide enough if it was a bicycle lane and you have a bus pulling over. You're not going to have enough room to go around the bus there either. So this is part of a grant application, and this segment of it is necessary for this grant application. There are certain criteria for this grant, and one of them, having this dedicated bus-bike lane, would help meet one of the criteria. So if you have questions about the grant or the necessity of including this in it, we do have Cynthia Hoyle, a consultant with the MTD here. She can answer any questions that you have about that. And what we're looking for really tonight is just a kind of an endorsement, basically, that this will then go to the City Council, and the City Council will hopefully provide a letter of support that would then accompany the grant application.
So what questions or comments do people have about this one? Who wants to start?
What do bus drivers think of this?
Just curious. Well, there was a survey done of bus operators on during the University District Bus Bike Safety Study. And the MTD does have a special training program for sharing the road with bicycles. So I can't, we haven't surveyed and asked them what they think about this. People tend not to like changes. However, I think the benefits in terms of knowing where bicyclists would be, and particularly at the intersections, will facilitate operators on campus, because one of their biggest problems is people making turns and maneuvers around the buses that are unexpected, not legal, coming out of nowhere. And if you looked at the study at all, they looked at the 3 crashes that had occurred with bicyclists on campus, and 2 of the 3 were a result of a bicyclist doing something illegal and crashing into the side of a bus off of a sidewalk or something like that. So taking the bikes off of the sidewalk on Green Street would improve safety and I think make it easier for the operators, especially when they come to intersections, to operate with the bicyclists. It will take some education on everybody's part, and I'm sure that we will have to talk about that a lot and provide information. But based on my experience and on the fact that the automobiles would be eliminated from the lane, that subtracts one additional thing that they have to look for out of the right-of-way they're operating in. I think that it would be a win-win for everybody. So I can't give you a testimonial on behalf of the operators, but I can only provide you with that information.
I have a couple of
Morgan?
comments I just want to add. For one thing, the grant application that this is a component of is also going to address Wright Street and White Street. And
Right.
so there's a significant impact to the grant
Yeah.
in addition to Green Street. Another is on Green Street officially in the 70s, there was a bi-directional off-road path on the north side of the curb, above the curb. During the last 30 years, 40 years, it has been interrupted by one building project or another, or the lines have faded, or all the different things that have happened to disintegrate the U of I bike path network is incredibly apparent on Green Street. And there's so many riders, and people do not know how to go. It's very difficult to know what to do at each one of those crossings that Cynthia was talking about. Also, the bus bike lanes had been brought up in the late 90s when we did the campus area transportation study and made recommendations. A shared bus bike lane on Green Street was one of the potential suggestions from that. But we didn't know anything about how well it would work, and so the study that MTD actually funded for bus bike interaction that did recommend that we go forward with the bus bike lanes on Green Street was very helpful to the CATS agencies. And there was one other thing. Oh, you said it would eliminate traffic or motor vehicle, other cars in that right lane. But it actually would allow right turns through that lane.
That's correct.
It'd be buses and bikes only except at right turn locations. And I think it's an amazing idea. I really want to do it.
Yeah, T.Y. Lin is John LaPlante's one of the leading experts in the country on these things and serves on the national committees that make recommendations at the national level for these kinds of facilities. So that's one of the reasons why MTD contracted with them, is because the campus bike plan was being done and we were looking at these options, and we felt like we needed a level of expertise that we didn't necessarily have here. We have an intensely urban environment on campus, and we have very high frequency bus traffic, an enormous amount of pedestrians, and a lot of bike traffic, similar to Chicago, where he's based. And so having that experience of actually implementing these and knowing how they work and their recommendations provided us with a lot of reassurance about the safety of proceeding with these designs.
So we could either, make a motion to endorse this design on Green Street between Wright and Lincoln. If everybody thought it was a horrible idea, we could make a motion not to endorse it, or some qualifications to our recommendation. Ray?
I would propose that we endorse it as presented.
A motion by Ray. Does anyone want to second that?
I would second that.
Seconded by Sue. Any other discussion or questions or input before we vote on this one? Morgan?
One of the other things that occurred to me is when we start looking at implementing a solution for Green Street, we just talked about why it needs a solution. That's the shared bus bike lane is a much more cost-effective solution than redesigning the street, moving the median, moving the lights from the center, possibly widening it to allow for 2 lanes plus a bike lane. All of that is just, I wanted to mention that. And I still think it's a great.
No, and I personally think that having the shared lane is a whole lot better from the biking with buses standpoint, because I don't, the here I am and here you are thing, that's too close.
Any other comments or questions? So the motion is to endorse it as presented. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that carries. This recommendation will then go on to City Council, I think, and we'll certainly see the project if it gets funding at later stages too. I'm sure there are many details like how it tapers and how we sign it at the end and transition from this to the other segments of Green Street, all kinds of details that, should this get to construction, we'll be able to review them again. Cynthia?
Yeah, I was hoping to add, I know that in your joint meeting there were some concerns expressed, and I wanted to say that this was only a recommendation we got in the study. We haven't reached design stage yet. If we get the grant, Then you go back and get down to the nitty-gritty of the actual design, and that's when we will get down to answering a lot of the questions I think that some people have, as to how exactly you put this in and how it all works. And so that, if we get the grant, then we'll probably be talking to you again. But thank you.
Thanks. Next tonight, we have...
I'll just say that'll be
yeah.
going to the City Council on October 10th.
Okay, October 10th. Perfect. 7 p.m.
Yeah.
And it's in the same room here. And at council meetings, if anybody wants to come speak, there are public comment cards. So anybody here on the commission is welcome. I mean, certainly the minutes or some information about this recommendation we made will go in some documentation kind of format for the city council meetings. But if anybody wants to come speak on the topic, you're of course welcome to come at 7 p.m. and fill out a little public comment card and speak on the topic as well. Next tonight we have Complete Streets, and there was a text amendment PDF file that was attached to the email for the packet for this, so I hope people got a chance to look over that. I don't think we printed it out for tonight's meeting up here on the desk. It was something like 6 pages long. And Rebecca Bird is here to present this topic to us.
This is an amendment, a proposed amendment to the comprehensive plan, which this is the 2005 Urbana Comprehensive Plan. This is basically, for those of you that don't know, this is the document that we use in planning to make decisions on. So, for example, if someone wants to rezone a property from residential to commercial, there are maps in here that kind of are a broad brushstroke of what we want the city to look like in the future, and we would consult the map for that part of the community, and if it was consistent with that, then staff would probably recommend that we support that rezoning. And so this has sections in it on transportation, and so the it's a little, I'll have to give you a little background just so that you understand why we're doing a complete streets policy using this document. In the beginning of the comprehensive plan, there's a vision for Urbana, and it has 4 goals, 4 cornerstone goals, and one of them is about mobility. And that goal says that the elements for keeping Urbana accessible to everyone by promoting a safe, multimodal transportation system with high quality and efficient infrastructure. And then later in the document, there are specific goals to do with each of these cornerstone goals, and then there are implementation strategies of how do we get to implementing those goals. So most of our kind of overarching policy statements and planning are in the comprehensive plan, and so we thought that the most effective way to adopt a complete streets policy was to put it in the comprehensive plan. So the comprehensive plan is not, it doesn't deal with the details, it deals with the overarching policies and ideals. So in the memo that I sent you, there are 2 sentences that we're proposing to add to the comprehensive plan. The first one is under a goal that is under this mobility goal, and the major goal, it's 47.0, and it's to create a multimodal transportation system. And the goal that we're proposing to add is to use complete streets concept in designing, constructing, reconstructing, and maintaining roadways. And then we would also add an implementation strategy into there's a matrix at the end that is a wonderfully long to-do list of how we achieve these different goals. And so it looks like this. Here are the implementation strategies. This column right here is the type of strategy. Is it a policy? Is it an action, council action, and so on? Is it something we need to study further, and so on? And then there's just more information about who's responsible for implementing it and when, and so on. So the implementation strategy that we're proposing to add is to update appropriate documents such as the Urbana Manual of Practice to reflect the Complete Streets policy. So this would be in the comprehensive plan, we don't actually talk about the nitty-gritty of what is a complete street and how do we implement it. That would be done in a couple of different documents, and so far at the staff level, we've been discussing how we would amend other documents to actually put the complete streets policy into effect. And the two documents we've identified so far that would need amendments are the manual of practice, which is what the engineering department uses, Brad's specialty, what they use to evaluate road projects. So the designing, constructing, reconstructing, and maintaining roadways, and also how they evaluate when a private developer is proposing to develop roads as well. And then also in the subdivision code, which is a document that deals with dividing land. So that's not just new subdivisions, but that's also pieces of land. For example, this city building is on one large block, and if it were to be demolished and we wanted to divide it into smaller pieces, that would also fall under the subdivision code. So those are the two documents that that we've identified so far that would need to have some changes, but we'll work on that at the staff level. And then those would come before you for comments and input, and then go to the Plan Commission, and then to the City Council for those. So for now, all we're asking for comments on are the two sentences that we're talking about adding to the to the comprehensive plan. And so just a little bit of other background. I'm sure that you are aware of this, but the impetus for a complete streets policy comes from the 2010 Urbana Mayor and City Council goals, from the 2005 Comprehensive Plan in more general terms, and from the 2008 Urbana Bicycle Master Plan. So all of those different documents, even if they don't use the term complete streets policy, they do suggest that the city should be moving in that direction. And the 2010 Urbana Mayor and City Council goals specifically says that we should adopt a complete streets policy. So that's provided, some of that background is provided in the memo. And then there's just a definition of what a complete streets policy, what complete streets means, really, and which all of you know, but this is this memo will be modified slightly and then go to the Plan Commission, and they will need more of a definition, which is why it was explained in more detail than probably all of you needed. Gary pointed out this evening that in the suggested language for the objective, use complete streets concept in designing, constructing, reconstructing, and maintaining roadways. Gary has pointed out that some definitions of roadways are limited to the actual street and do not include the sidewalks and shoulders and so on. Sorry?
Yeah, shoulders, sorry.
Right. So, so just before the meeting, we talked about this and thought about amending that to read, use complete streets concept in designing, constructing, reconstructing, and maintaining roadways and public rights of way. So that would include, that's a more technical term, but that the right of way is the what the city owns between properties, basically between lot lines. So that would include the roadway, and then it would definitely include, the sidewalks, unless they're actually on private property, which is occasionally the case. But generally, it would include all of that and shoulders. So this evening, we're just looking for comments on those two sentences, and then this will go forward to the Plan Commission and then to the City Council. It will go to the Plan Commission on October 13th, and then be forwarded to the City Council on October 24th.
And Rebecca, do you want us to make any kind of endorsement or statement about it?
We don't need an endorsement, just comments, just general comments.
Okay. Morgan?
This is actually just about the memo. One of the things that I keep trying to find ways to tie it back in our long-range transportation plan, we talk about equity and complete streets and can be about equity.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't look like the four main reasons you've listed there I've lost the page again, safety, health, sustainability, and livability. They don't seem to touch on that. And the economic, it's a benefit to people who need to cut back on their budgets. They can walk more, that kind of thing. So I don't know how that could get tied in.
It's a good suggestion.
And are we, regarding suggestions, I mean, are we allowed to pass on that suggestion as long as the group likes it, of Gary and yours about adding the phrase "and public rights of way"?
That, I think it would be useful if everyone is in general agreement of that you do include that as a recommendation.
Okay.
That this go forward with that piece added. On
Okay.
comments on, like Morgan's on just a general memo, that is just
Okay.
casual. You can just make any comments on that, because that's not part of the actual language that is the amendment.
Okay. Gary?
Yeah, cool question. So this is, what did you call it again, these two sentences?
These are an amendment to
An
the
amendment.
comprehensive plan.
Because it's not a policy.
It is not the policy. So the policy in the, this would be adopted by resolution. And so in a resolution, you have whereas statements that kind of explain and set the context. And one of the whereas statements there would give a definition of a complete streets policy. And then it would simply be the part that becomes law would simply add those two sentences into the comprehensive plan. So the actual how we implement it, how we define the policy other than in more general terms, will come later. That's kind of the nitty-gritty, what we need to do in updating the manual of practice and the subdivision code.
Okay. Because when I look at, like, the Complete Streets organization, whatever that's called, they have a whole list of 10 things that policies should have, and all these kinds of guidelines. And so that would come later.
There are different ways of dealing with this, but we thought that the most effective, when we look at different decisions and we make those recommendations about decisions to the Plan Commission or to the City Council or to this body, we use documents like the comprehensive plan, and this is our most basic document. It sets out all of those policies, so that we thought that it gave more weight to a complete streets policy by actually amending the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
And then all of the details come.
And just a
later.
couple of comments on the memo thing, too. I see no mention of speed at all, anywhere. I mean, you say that something should be done to reduce speed, but we still have 30 mile an hour through all our residential streets, and any places that have lots of pedestrians and bikes have 25, 20, 19 in Europe, and this is a real impediment to people feeling safe on our streets, is the speed. I know, we live in the fast lane in Illinois, but maybe that should be mentioned as well. At least as a concern, But
Because of what Gary said, I had a question. You asked, putting it in the comprehensive plan, does that make it a policy? Is that a policy? And at first Rebecca said no, but then as the discussion went on, I really see the comprehensive plan as the main policy document for the city, for changes in the city. So I think
Which
you
it
might
is, but
really assess
the
in a
actual,
way.
how you then implement it. So the whereas statement that would be in the resolution would have a definition of a complete streets policy, but it wouldn't talk about how we implement that. So it would say that we will look at accommodating all of the different modes of transportation when designing, constructing, reconstructing, and maintaining roadways and public right-of-ways, but it doesn't say how we do that. So that has to come in other documents that are more technical.
Any other comments or questions? I guess we could then make a motion, if we want to support this word with the added phrase "and public rights of way," so that it's a little broader. Does anyone want to
I'll make a
move
motion.
that? Okay. A motion by Brad. Anyone want to second it? Okay. Any other discussion at all on this topic before we vote and move on? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that motion carries. So that comment will get sent on to the Plan Commission, and remind us again of those meeting dates.
Yes. That will go to the Plan Commission on October 13th, and then to the City Council meeting on October 24th. I'm not sure about the October 24th, I'm sorry. Definitely the October 13th. But the 24th is a committee of the whole. Perhaps November 7th.
Okay.
Sorry, not
That
quite
sounds
sure on
right.
that one.
Okay, great. The next topic on tonight's agenda is the bike repair station and the final location. I know we gave feedback on all kinds of locations at our previous meetings. Rebecca, tell
Yes.
us what do you have for us about the bike repair station?
We actually have the bike repair stations. They were delivered, and so these were the locations that we discussed, I believe it was 2 meetings ago, and not all of you, I think, were here. But so here we have number 1, here is the parking deck, the entrance on Main Street, and then also the parking deck, the entrance on Elm Street. The third one is near the north entrance to Lincoln Square, the post office, that area. The fourth was the library. The fifth was near the entrance to Common Ground Food Co-op in Lincoln Square Village. And then the sixth was near the bicycle parking for the market, for the farmers market in the parking lot of the of Lincoln Square Village. And the comments from that night were mainly that the parking garage made more sense. We thought that it would provide cover, shelter, and therefore that the not only would it be more comfortable to use the bicycle repair station, but it would also extend its life by protecting it from the elements. I did speak with the manufacturers about how much longer its lifespan would be if it were covered. And they said significant, that it will last much better. You won't need to replace pieces of it as regularly, and just the entire piece of equipment will last a lot longer if it is covered. And he said particularly that the tools hanging down and sitting in snow that then freezes, that turns to slush and freeze, that is really damaging to all of the tools. So I think at the last meeting there was a general consensus that the parking garage and this front entrance on Main Street was probably the best location. And we talked about whether or not we could be included in the signage, the new wayfinding signage project that's going on in downtown. And one of the first phase of that is identifying the parking garage and getting signage for the parking garage. So we were able to get in on that that project as it went out for bid. The first bids, I believe, were rejected, and it was sent out to bid again, and it included the identifying a bike fix-it station in that parking garage as an alternative for the signage. So that means that there were at least 2 sign kind of projects that people were bidding on, and if we can afford the alternative with the bike fix-it station on it, then we would go with that alternative. And those bids are not yet, the deadline hasn't passed yet. But we now have it, and so we're going forward with working out how to install it and so on. I just wanted to talk to all of you and get your sense on, is that the right location? And even if we can't be included on that main signage for the parking garage, that doesn't mean that we can't have signage for it, or that we would be able to be part of a later part of that signage and wayfinding project. But just wanted your input on whether or not you still felt that was the right location.
Sue?
My first question would be, where does the plowed snow go?
Well, this is inside the parking garage. Inside.
Okay, so it's not just
So
because
do you know where the bicycle parking is On the north side of the parking garage now?
Oh, the north
Inside.
side, okay. I
Inside.
was thinking of the Elm Street.
Yeah, no, this is actually inside on the north side, so it's on Main Street, and you can see it, it's open, but it is separated with a low wall from the sidewalk, so there wouldn't be any snow in there, or just drifting slightly, bits of snow.
Gary?
Yeah, and what impact would it have on the parking spaces that are already there for bicycles? Are we going to take away from that or take away from a car space?
We would need to look at that. I mean, it's not a particularly large, the actual fix-it station is not very big. So I would need to speak with the facilities manager about how we would actually put that in. I don't think it would involve removing bicycle parking spaces.
Any other comments on?
Oh, actually, you
location?
can see here, I don't know if you can see that up here, the first picture. So this is the area that we're talking about.
Mhm.
So there's the bicycle parking. Zoom in, yeah.
Hmm. Oh, yeah.
Right in here.
Mhm.
If there were bikes parked, would you still be able to get to it?
We would need
It's hard to see.
Yeah, we would need to work on exactly how it would be located in there. That part we haven't gotten to. But clearly, we wouldn't install it anywhere that you couldn't access the other parking spaces or too close to the other parking spaces so that you could then use, as someone pointed out here last time, use the tools on that to steal a bike or steal pieces of a bike that was parked next to it. We would be careful of that sort of thing.
Yeah. My one comment is, I do think this is the best of the 6 locations, and it's weather protected, so that's great. I park at these racks often, and the one issue I have sometimes with the space there that you might ask the facility staff about is they sometimes use there's a concrete ledge to the right-hand side of that door where staff that door is kind of a back, the brown door, right there, is kind of a back entrance to the UBA office and the equipment storage space that's under the slope of the deck. And they often store like bags of brush or bags of trash or things and kind of pile it along that wall, or like old air conditioning units that they've deinstalled. Just random stuff over the years has been stored there. Because they don't really have any other place to leave their trash as it goes out. And so it sometimes does create a little bit of clutter, getting bikes in and out right along the wall. So if they could find a better place to keep stuff, maybe it would make that whole area be roomy enough to navigate through, especially if the fix-it station ends up on that west wall.
I'm not familiar, I can't remember where the fix-it station has the hook for the bike, because it's actually a bike stand. Is it perpendicular to the station? So you actually are needing, I guess I was imagining that it was on one side, and then you might want to be able to get around behind it. But I think it also might be on the edge. Do you remember this? Anyway, if it's on the edge, then it's going to be perpendicular to the station, so we need to just make sure that there's access all around. And then I also would expect, just from it's Illinois, that snow will be able to come in from this side by the sidewalk, so you want to be farther away. It might be that those
But you also
bike
want to be visible.
racks that are there now may have to, it might be that the whole area gets a little reconfigured to go with it.
Yeah.
But I agree, it's a great place. And the ones on the U of I are, because we're doing it as a partnership, MTD, Champaign-Urbana, and the U of I are all getting these. The ones on campus are going to be outside. So we'll find out the difference quickly.
Also, I imagine the ones on campus will be used more. There's just heavier foot traffic over there, or bicycle traffic.
Any other comments? Okay. Then moving on to our next item tonight, the draft campus bike plan network. And Rebecca is also presenting this item.
Actually, this one is mainly Morgan. I'll bring up
wonderful.
This is, the university has been working together with the City of Urbana, the City of Champaign, and the MTD to develop a network. And the reason that we've been working together on this is to make sure that it connects well with our network here in Urbana and also then the network in Champaign. So this is going to come before you at a later time for official comments and then recommendations or comments that would then go on, and it will go to, we're not quite sure of the process, if it would go to the Plan Commission and the City Council or just to the City Council. But because it does include parts of Urbana, so the city would review it, not adopt it, but review it. And so it'll come before you again, but we wanted to just give you this, the draft network, so that you could then go away, think about it, and bring us any comments before it comes to you as the official, with the official comment time, so that we could take your comments into account and further work on the network if necessary. And now I'll turn it over to Morgan.
So first of all, this handout is almost impossible to read. We know that. We have 5 copies at the larger scale back there for those of you who really want a paper copy. And then we're going to send out the PDF as well so that you can look online. So this is just to hold something in your hand while I review it real quick. There are a number of different types of facilities that our task force has identified and recommended. There's an off-road trail. The only off-road trail, well, there's the main off-road trail that I can think of that's in the campus area is on Hazelwood through the Arboretum. It's a sort of a gravel path that connects Orchard Downs to Lincoln Avenue. That's the off-road trail concept. It's not really a formal facility so much as just an available pathway. Then there's a bike route. A bike route is going to definitely get a sign that says bike route, and it may or may not have sharrows, the shared use lane markings that are basically 2 little arrowheads in a bicycle. So a bike route on here does not really clarify whether it is going to have the sharrows or not at this point. There's a bike lane, which is definitely at least a 5-foot wide designated area for a bicycle within the roadway between the curb to curb, like on Goodwin. Bike lane. And then there's a dedicated bike path. So a dedicated bike path is, in theory, what we have right now on campus with the 6-foot wide bidirectional paths that are for bikes only. What we've tried to do with this is reduce the number of those and not have these dedicated bike paths immediately next to a street where we know it's more likely for a crash to occur and for injuries to happen. So these dedicated bike paths, which are shown in orange, are going to be, they have to be 8 foot wide at a minimum, and they will use the lane markings that you would see in the street for a bike lane, but with no vehicle traffic in between. So you take 2 bike lanes with the motor traffic lanes, get rid of the motor traffic lanes, and you've got a dedicated bike path. Is the concept of that facility. For example, and these basically are for going where the cars aren't supposed to be going, like straight across the quad. So there's a dedicated bike path. And the concept there also is that because there will be fewer of them and because it will be marked the same way as a bike lane in the street, it'll be more intuitive to the pedestrians that that's for bikes and that the bikes, so that you don't have the same conflict that we're having now with bikes on sidewalks and sidewalks on bikes right next to what theoretically should be a sidewalk and a dedicated bike path. So there are just a few limited ones of those, and they're really where there's no street available. And then we have a shared use path. The shared use paths are going to be a minimum of 10 feet wide, And it's basically a wide sidewalk that we know is going to have bikes on it. Right now, we know that we're going to include a sign for at least once per block in those shared use paths that says bikes yield to pedestrians. It's not going to necessarily have any marking on the sidewalk or any delineation about where the bikes should be, although that is something that people still ask about and could happen in the future. But the plan right now is at least a 10-foot wide sidewalk with a sign that says bikes yield to peds, and it would be included on the map as a shared use path. Big sidewalk, like on Kirby in Florida, within campus. And then there are a handful of locations that are shown in black as a study area. These are the locations of paths that we didn't have a solution for yet, but with the remainder resolved, we wanted to get this moving forward as much as possible, and we'll continue to work on those. And those are primarily Matthews Avenue, which is one way in different directions. We really need to look at a comprehensive solution for Matthews. It is a city of Urbana street, and we've had some tentative thoughts, but we haven't come down to a solution from the city's perspective. I don't think the Urbana bike plan says what Matthews should do. So it's still to be determined. Another one of those is where the bike path across the quad cuts through. Once you get into the Champaign side, the cyclists should be able to continue to the west, but it's a one-way road for a block. And so we've listed that as undetermined because the city of Champaign needs to work on a solution for allowing the bikes to continue along that same pathway. And then we have it's a question we need to get more in depth about how to connect the cyclists from Matthews to Goodwin. Between Matthews and Goodwin, there are actually 5 potential routes for bikes to go east or west just between Nevada and Green Street. And so we really ought to identify which ones we would support and encourage and make it more convenient. And that's a little complicated because of where the roads stop and where the T intersections are and all that. And then the last undetermined area is still in need of solution, and that is on Florida between Lincoln and Race. For the remainder of the University District, there is a 10-foot wide sidewalk along Kirby and then Florida, but when you get to Lincoln, it stops. And there's not even a sidewalk. It is university property, but it's Urbana street, and so there's some unknown solution for that area for connecting the bikes there. So those are the different types of designations on the plan. We also, within this, you can see some arrows going outside of the University District. You'll see like a blue arrow going north from Race Street. Pause for people to see that. Do you see the arrows? Mm-hmm. Those represent what is intended by the respective city plans. So if it's blue, it'll be bike lanes going that direction from there, so you can get some understanding of the continuity that we are planning.
Okay.
Do you have any questions about just what's on the plan?
What are the different numbers? Are those segment identifiers?
Oh, yes. We numbered those to look into just what size is that street and just to track it.
And what's your timeline and for adoption of this? Like, so if I'll have to study this. It's really wonderful to have a comprehensive plan for campus. And I'll have to kind of, as I wander around campus, look at the map and think, oh, right, okay, that's red, so that means this. It'll take me some time to formulate even any feedback. How soon do we need feedback, or what does the process look like going forward to gather feedback and let us give input? And
yeah. We really we need to get responses from all the campus area transportation agencies.
Okay.
So it'll be going through the city process for review and feedback, which I would actually ask Rebecca what that process should be. On campus, it'll go to the Chancellor's Capital Review Committee for approval. In Champaign, they're going to take it to the Plan Commission, and MTD is already approved based on the participation in the task force. It also has to go to the CATS committee. We'll probably take it to the CUATS technical and policy committees. So it's really going to be a large group of input on this proposed network. During the year, we have a graduate student in urban planning who is actually sitting right back there.
Hello.
Holly Nelson will be working on the actual layout design, so the concept designs, getting us drawings of the pieces that are part of the university and anything that the cities may want her to take a look at as well. And she has this whole academic year for doing that. Additionally, we have to update the original draft of the actual text behind this plan. There's goals that we've discussed but haven't been written and shared. So this is for pretty much a preliminary review by this body of the proposal.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah. Do you
Okay.
want specifics from us as we study this? You know, do you want us to be emailing you with an idea like, oh, I see a segment on here that could have a bike lane, or it might have room for this or that? Do you want us to email down to that level of specificity suggestions at this point?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Additionally, and I thought this a minute ago and it went away. Oh, the bike plan as it's drawn is how, when a building project on campus comes up, we always need to know how it's going to impact, how it would relate to a bicycle facility in that area. And so we're already using it that way. The new ECE building that's slated for Wright Street knows that it has to have a 10-foot wide sidewalk on the south of it because that's where this path is. And so it's already in use in that informal decision-making about layouts related to buildings or other projects, street reconstruction if we get to do that and that kind of thing. So it's important for us to complete this process and to get it on the formal campus master plan. But there's nothing that is holding its breath to get it completed in that sense, except that we need to get it done so that we can start actually seeking the funding on a major scale. And we have just the incremental funding, tiny thing here and there. And we're going to try and get the whole project funded. We'll just do it all. That's my plan.
Yeah. We'll second that. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask is how does that, how does the implementation of it work? Like, do you have a sense of whether a lot of this can be implemented with just paint and signage, or whether most of these changes are pavement, concrete, and the kind of more expensive physical reconstruction to do this?
Yeah, I don't think much of any of it can be done with just paint and signage.
Okay.
We don't have a dedicated funding source for bicycle facility improvements on campus, and it's something that we know is lacking. And I've been in discussions with the campus administration and students about the possibility of a bicycle funding source of some kind. And we've also talked about, or the sustainability efforts on campus have, when we report on how well we're doing on sustainability report cards here, there, and everywhere, they ask, how are you working with your foundation to get funding? And we tried to get the foundation involved in a lot of efforts, and this was the only thing that the foundation thought they could get a donation pool going for, or whatever. I don't know the terminology yet, but So I'm actually pretty excited about getting the foundation helping us to seek donors to support all the bicycle needs.
Mm-hmm.
Everything from the paths to the parking to the programs and the bike project on campus and all that.
Cool. What other comments or questions?
I have
Ray?
sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I apologize if you gave this answer because I've been studying this map, trying to orientate myself to it. But the arrows on the east side of Lincoln, is that like on Maine, Green, Illinois, and Oregon, Pennsylvania? Are those like planned?
Those are based on what the Urbana Master Plan has for those roads. So there's 4 blue ones and a red one, and so the blue ones represent bike lanes, but it doesn't include the timing that the Urbana Bike Plan has. So it doesn't say on this map whether it's the 5-year or the 20-year plan.
So I could be waiting 20 years.
Well, and also we have bike lanes shown on Green Street. So we do need to figure out how to delineate that once it gets decided about bus bike lanes.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Michelle?
I just had a question. I was wondering if you could maybe talk, you talked a little bit about it, if you could talk a little bit more about how you've considered impact on pedestrians by what it is that you'd be putting in, because obviously we want to make things more accessible for the cyclists, but we don't want to do that at the expense of pedestrians. So,
yeah, we had a class study the interaction between pedestrians and cyclists from sort of a social marketing standpoint, and they made a lot of recommendations about the need to improve the social relationship between pedestrians and bicyclists on campus. And as I questioned them about what sort of input they were getting, it was clear we need to delve into that a little bit more, but almost the number one complaint was about not knowing who's supposed to be in which place. And I had said that I'm still getting questions about the bikes on sidewalks within the university area. We had a recommendation just recently about if there is a wide sidewalk and a bicyclist is using it, and there's a lot of pedestrians, but not so many that it's entirely pedestrians like the quad at class change time, but a significant number. And the cyclist is trying to maneuver through that. The suggestion I got was we should separate them so that they're not weaving in and out. That's part of the delineation when we have the dedicated path. We're hoping that with the clear markings and the formal design that and fresh paint that those bike paths will be more obviously bike paths, and the sidewalks can then be used almost entirely by pedestrians. But that's what I was getting into about the shared use paths where it's a wide sidewalk. Right now, our intention is simply a sign that says bikes yield to pedestrians. But there was a marking I saw somewhere that was basically like a mini Sharrow, and it was just a little picture of a bike, but it was only this big. It was only a foot in diameter, a little circle. And I think it was in Seattle. And they had, I keep thinking it'd be interesting to take that marking and just sort of dot out where we anticipate bikes ought to be riding on the shared use sidewalks. It's not in the manual on uniform traffic control devices, so it would, it's actually something that we would be able to do as a pilot study or try it out. But there's a lot of things that could be done. The other thing is with that study that the students did, they recommended just simply I think it was called a love campaign, and they wanted to give pedestrians little hang tags to put on their backpack that says "I love bikes." So as you're walking down, or you're walking down the sidewalk, you've got something on your back. A cyclist is coming up, and they'll see the little "I'm a bike-friendly person" sign. And they wanted to give bicyclists similar decals of some kind to put on their bike. I pictured the triangles that we used at Bike to Work Day. Those were awesome. And also the desire to give bicyclists bells. We've been giving out lights with Light the Night. Maybe we should give out bells just as part of this awareness of, I know most cyclists who are commuters and are well aware of the best way to behave are going to give some alert to a pedestrian they're coming up behind. But a lot of the bicyclists on campus are not that way. They don't know that it's etiquette to say, "I'm passing on your left," etc. And one more thing, we have a learning and community class with the College of Engineering this year, and they have actually 3 project teams, one of whom is going to take the survey information that we've gotten from various sources, including the bus-bike interaction survey, the campus multimodal survey from 2006, the mobility implementation plan comments, all these different surveys, and pull out the information about the pedestrian and bicycle interaction, and try to give us the key points that we need to address about that. Does that help? Is that too much?
Yeah, it does. If I could make a couple suggestions.
Yeah.
It sounds like most of the people you've talked to are students. A lot of faculty staff walk the campus as well, so I would suggest that you contact some of those people, maybe get a focus group or something, and I'd certainly be willing to help with that process. I think that your idea of a pilot of some of the signage and visuals would be really helpful, because I know a lot of the walkers I know are still confused even about what a Shero is, and they've been around for a while. So before we go choosing symbols and sink a lot of money into signs that maybe will confuse people even further, we might want to test some things out, if not by focus group, then maybe by a sample area with some observational study or something.
That's a great idea.
I think it might be interesting as well to, I don't know if the GIS already has this data or not, but to do a similar version of this map that has the pedestrian sidewalk network on it, to get a sense of where are the places where the sidewalk ends, so that you have a sense of where is there no way for peds to get from point A to point B that they would want to. It's often those strange places where the sidewalk ends where I find the most conflict, when all of a sudden the cyclists and the pedestrians are all like thrown into some spot and like, well, I'm trying to get to that building right over there, except my facility ended or changed and now I really don't know where I am, but I'll just run over you, or just plow through the crowd. And I don't know if it would help to do a map of that, if the GIS has it or something, to help find where are those spots that are gaps in the actual PED network. But it might be that by fixing gaps in the PED network, as well as implementing the actual cyclist facilities, by doing both, you end up with making sure you have a complete network.
Or laying one on top of the other and lay the PED network on top of the bike network and see where your problems lie.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, but it's a very interesting question, because
Yeah.
the PED traffic is so dense. In a way, we didn't have to deal with PEDs in the Urbana Bike Master Plan, because Urbana has sidewalks and the pedestrians will be on sidewalks, and we can build bike facilities and never the twain shall meet. But on campus, they're just so intertwined. Gary?
Yeah, some comments about the bike lanes. A little bit of history. I grew up riding bicycle in New York City in the 60s and 70s, never saw a bike lane. And I went to Montreal as a grad student, never saw a bike lane, and kept riding through the winter too. Came to Urbana, Champaign, never saw a bike lane either, and so recently. But I did see really first bike lanes that I used a lot was in Tucson, where my daughter lived for 5 years, and I love the bike lanes out there. They were along all the arterials. You can go wherever you wanted. It was fast and it was safe. I saw the bike lanes in Chicago after that, and I was horrified. I was afraid to use them, and I tried to figure out why. In Tucson, there is no parking along any bike lanes. In Tucson, almost every time there's a right turn, it switches over before you get there, like we have here on Main Street coming into Vine, right? It's switched over. We have a few places over there, too. So I'm really sort of concerned about the bike lanes along the parking. There was an article this spring in the Chicago Tribune. Active Transportation Alliance, which is involved in efforts to make streets safe for bicyclists, pedestrian motorists in the Chicago region, is launching a campaign to increase public awareness about dooring crashes. The group considers doorings the most prevalent threat to on-street cyclists. Informal surveys the Alliance has conducted among its members indicate that more than half the people who bike on streets have been doored at least once. And you know, I went out to take pictures of my little Honda Civic, open up on all the bike lanes that have parking here, and in some places the door is like covering 3/4 of the bike lane. So that's my concern about bike lanes along parked cars and also where there's a lot of heavy right turn movements. And so, and we're sort of doing a mix of things now. I mean, the ones on Washington, there's no parking, for example. The ones on Philo, no parking, but the ones on Illinois is the Chicago style. That's a Chicago style. It's 7 feet parking, 5-foot bike lane, 10-foot travel lane, and that's really cramped. And my training now as a league cycling instructor and cycling savvy instructor, we tell people never get closer than 5 feet to a parked car. That means you're outside the bike lane. This is what, you know, we're sort of teaching. So I'd like to see on here, it's a big difference to me if the bike lane is along no parking or parking, and just blue doesn't do it. I'd like to see where there's parking going to be. And in those cases, it may make a whole lot more sense to forget the bike lane and put that sharrow out there, 13, 14 feet from the curb, where you're way out of the bike lane on one side and have a bike out of the parking on one side, and the bike lane on the other side where there's no parking. So that's sort of my spiel about the parking and the concern.
We do have a list from about a year ago of which of these bike lane roads have parking with them, and we're getting that updated for you from earlier conversations. But some of the roads will have to have parking removed entirely if we proceed with the bike lanes.
That means both sides.
Both sides, in some cases. It was our expectation that generally we would, if there was parking on both sides, we'd have to remove it from one side. But I completely understand your comment, and we are going to have to look at exactly that when we get into the details of the design, because the Illinois street path, for example, it has the 7 feet. It has 7 feet parking lanes, 5-foot bike lanes, and 10-foot travel lanes, and there's nothing that could be smaller. Those are all the smallest possible. There may be a road, I'm not familiar off the top of my head with which of these roads have wide enough roadways that it could be a 7-foot parking lane and a 7-foot bike lane, 10-foot, 10-foot, and 5-foot curb. That makes sense to me. I don't know if it came across. But so we need to look into the actual details of the designs for each one of these. The other thing, just so you're aware, is that the Parking System Review Committee recommended taking parking off of streets. The campus parking master plan needs to get an update, and I think that as that proceeds, we'll get a better understanding of whether they are going to move them all off the streets, or if maybe where we want to put in a bike lane, we can remove all the parking in that area. And it's a discussion that we haven't gotten into yet. So I could tell you which ones have parking now. I mean, I could look it up, but I wouldn't know at this point which ones we are planning to still have parking. So it is a discussion that needs to continue. Yeah.
Can you say why the Parking System Review Committee recommended removing street parking?
Sure. The Parking System Review Committee was, I think it was actually 2 years ago now, and it looked at It's a long story. Let me see. Oh, just because without having on-street parking, you have less on-street traffic. It was about reducing traffic.
Okay, so it's not like they explicitly have a goal of making it safer for bicyclists or reducing dooring, but it just so happens that their goal of reducing traffic congestion and things feeds into this broader.
Right, but the reduced traffic congestion is part of the transportation demand management policies,
Yes.
which fed into the
Okay.
recommendation from the committee.
Well, that would solve the problem.
Yeah. Yeah,
Anything
that
else?
makes sense.
Can't get door, there's no door.
Any other comments? Sue?
Just sort of like to concur that if it comes down to, yes, you can make the minimum with the bike lane, the Shara would be better. Because that's the only time I was sort of almost doored, where, was when there was a bike lane and, I needed to be out of it, and, it was like, that's, it can be more hazardous to have a bike lane than not.
Okay, well, this isn't an action item tonight, so,
Right, so
but,
there are 5 copies of the large version over there,
okay,
and we'll get to PDFs out.
great. Thank you very much. Congratulations, and we will, anyone should feel free, as you study details, to send Morgan feedback, and I'm sure we'll see more of this. That was our last item of new business tonight. We have a couple old business items that Brad Bennett is going to present. First, sort of some updates on a variety of different projects.
Yeah, we've been busy at Public Works. The first item on there is the ADA compliance plan update. The city's original ADA compliance plan dates back to 1993, so it's rather old. We're looking at kind of revisiting it and revamping it. Probably the major components of it would be kind of a resurvey, reevaluation of how many ramps are out of compliance. Probably come out with a new prioritization system to better direct our efforts at the highest priority locations, and then probably a new work plan to try to come into full compliance and get all our ramps eventually converted over to meet the current ADA standards.
I have a
So,
question.
sure.
What, do you know yet, are you going to be using the description of compliance based on the current standards or based on what's allowable for the ramp? If it was constructed in the previous ADA standards, then it can have those parallel or perpendicular lines cut in there, but if it were to be impacted by a street project, it would have to go up to having the truncated domes. Do you know?
What we are considering doing with that is kind of creating a tiered approach within the prioritization, where if it had the tines but all the slopes and other key criteria were met, that those would be bumped below. So our efforts would be focused more on, getting them to be the correct slopes or eliminating actual barrier curve, to kind of focus on the major impediments, for disabled people. And, the tines, can be navigated. That would be a lower priority. We would eventually, our intention would be eventually to address those and bring them up to what the current is, but that would be a lower priority.
Go ahead.
Okay. The second item we had on here, and this is just kind of some general feedback, or I guess something to get started, discussion points on, but I guess there's been some issues with inline skaters using the bike lanes throughout Urbana. I guess there's a university inline skating club, and there's been some complaints by citizens. And one of the things I know both the police and Public Works were kind of starting the thinking process is, number one, is this an issue? We don't, I believe, have any ordinance that prevents it. So, one of the considerations is this something that we need to look at and address? And obviously, we would want some input back from the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee on whether you thought it was an issue, whether it was something you thought the city needed to look at regulating. But that would be something we would look in from you for what your thoughts and opinions on allowing, skateboarders or inline skating to use either the on-street bike lanes or any of the off, street facilities.
Yeah, I think that one is maybe a significant enough question that it's something we schedule for a future meeting, and we and if it's possible for you to prepare some sort of comparison, or what do other cities do, or what are sort of our options? Do some cities completely ban that on all roads? I don't know. Or what does the traffic data tell us? Are there ever crashes? And maybe if it's not a safety hazard, maybe we don't need to regulate it. But somehow a little bit of background about what our options are, or what other cities do, and what the crash data shows would help me, at least, to get my head around that question. I have heard it come up. I've heard citizens really confused, and we don't explicitly allow it or prohibit it right now. And so I know people who want to skate or people who want to do inline skating are totally confused about whether they're breaking the rules or not. And providing some clarity and some recommendation from this body, I think, would be beneficial. So, Morgan?
I was just going to ask, what sort of complaints are they? Is it a complaint of not knowing the rules, or is it that drivers don't want them there?
I think it's been a little bit of both. I think there's actually been some citizens that may have called the police to report, the inline skaters being in the bike lanes. And of course, the police response was, we don't think that they're breaking any law that's on the book. So, and I'm sure it's been the other way too. I'm sure there's people that are, confused about whether they're using it legally or not.
Gary?
Yeah, I'm an inline skater, and maybe I'll get in trouble for mentioning this, but I do go on the streets and on the paths down Race and Meadowbrook Park. My understanding, though, is that pedestrians are not allowed on the roadway if there is a sidewalk. And inline skaters and skateboarders are pedestrians. So I think that under current state law, it is illegal for skaters to use the street. Try to use the sidewalk. You're going to get very far. So we need to look into what's already the deal. But I believe, because this came up many years
the
ago.
Illinois Motor Vehicle Code
Yeah.
at the state level that it could be illegal.
Yeah, I believe so. So that would take them off the bike lanes, but not off-street paths, which are not part of the roadway. Sorry?
How do you know they're defined as pedestrians?
Because we've been through this when I first started. When the skating craze first started, there were articles in the News Gazette, and it was mentioned it was illegal. And I think I looked it up, and yeah, they're considered pedestrians. I mean, either you're driving a vehicle or a bicyclist, which is a device, but bicyclists have the rights and duties and responsibilities of a vehicle driving, or you're a pedestrian.
But you're wheeled.
You're,
Seems to make you more like a bicycle.
And you can move at 10 miles an hour? I mean, how...
well, okay,
Well,
look
okay,
it up, but
but
that's
obviously
my
we need to talk
understanding. You're
about
on foot. You're on foot.
I guess you could look at it both ways. I mean, you're on foot, but you are on wheels. And that does change, I mean, in terms of speed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
all kinds of things
anyway.
that changes.
Okay.
That's what I know.
Huh, interesting.
Ray?
At the risk of having to do this all over again for another group of people, I would just say offhand that I'd be quite happy to share the bike path, really. I mean,
Bike lane 2.
Okay.
Well, I'll do some additional research, and we'll get it on a future agenda to have a more detailed discussion, look at what some other the communities are doing, and
Okay.
maybe do a little more research on state law.
Great. Thanks.
Moving on, the next item for update, the Main Street bike lanes update. Clark Dietz is proceeding with the design on it. They've been out surveying and working on the preliminary design drawings, so work is proceeding. They're still planning on starting on the construction of that in the summer of 2012. The Boneyard Creek project update, they're nearing pretty close to 75% design completion on that. Their intention is to have the design 75% complete by the end of September here, so we're moving forward. Still anticipating a late spring, early summer 2012 start on that. And that project will include both the reconstruction of Ray Street from Griggs all the way up to Park Street, and on Broadway from Water Street up to University Avenue. There'll be new bike lanes added as part of Broadway Avenue's reconstruction.
Question.
Sure.
For the Broadway Avenue at University, Broadway and University,
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to include pedestrian improvements for the intersection?
No,
Okay,
it
so it
won't
stops, okay.
be. Yeah, it goes right up to the intersection, but stops just a little bit short of it. We're not going to be making any improvements to that intersection. And then on the High Cross Road multi-use trail project update, the project was bid out. Stark Excavating and Construction was the low bid on it. They plan to start work the second week of October. They'll probably start on the multi-use path bridge. Will be kind of the first element they start working on, and that one, they're anticipating the construction will be complete by summer 2012. So, but that's all I had for updates. Anyone have any questions about any of those projects in particular, or?
Gary?
Yeah, the Main Street one goes from where to where?
Oh, I think it starts over at like Cedar Street, and it goes all the way over towards Scottswood.
Okay, so this is not downtown.
No,
Okay,
it'll
that-
include downtown.
Yeah, where is Cedar Street?
Cedar Street would be just west of,
By Strawberry Fields
yeah.
and behind
Oh,
Busey,
okay.
behind Busey Bank.
Okay.
And where's the other one?
Well, it goes all the way kind of over to the eastern
Oh,
limits.
like Main
That's
Street, or not Main Street.
over by Scotts.
Smith.
Yeah.
So, and we'll be able to look at these fine designs when they come out?
Yeah, once we have the design documents in from the consultants, we can bring them in and share them with the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee and have you take a look at it and provide some input. We have not received, in Public Works, we have not received the documents to review and comment on yet, so we're still waiting for them, but we'll be glad to share them with you.
Okay, thanks, Brad. Then last tonight, we have some quick items from Rebecca Bird about Light the Night and the LIB Complete Streets audit.
We did have Light the Night, I believe it was the 4th annual last week, and we successfully installed 800 blinky light sets, so the front and the rear light, at 2 locations. It went very well. It was very smooth. We ran out at both locations shortly before the end of the scheduled time period, which was 8 o'clock. And some of you, Gary was there installing, Brad, Morgan, myself, we were all there. Went very well. It was very successful.
Just a shout out to the
Yeah.
volunteers. 'Cause
Yes.
It doesn't normally get done that quickly. It's the same number as last year, and it was just so excellent. So it's great.
At the location I was at, it was very smooth. We kept the line kept going down to being no line, and it's never happened before. Yeah, it was very efficient. It's great. Yeah, the volunteers really are fantastic. They work with no access to toilets, to water, to food, and they just, it's a lot of bending over, and it is difficult, it's challenging, and they're just fantastic. The LIB Complete Streets audit, that is the League of Illinois Bicyclists has done an audit of Champaign and Urbana streets, certain Champaign and Urbana streets, and it is being released to the public this Thursday. There will be a press release going out, and it will be available on their website. We have looked at a draft version of it, but it will be released to the public. So if you go to their website, which is www.bikelib.org, on Thursday, that will be made available if you'd like to take a look at it. It does include some of our newer bicycle facilities and rates them very highly. Goodwin and Philo were right up at the top of the projects in the city, in the community, I'm sorry.
Oops, you forgot the most important part, though, is that we beat Champaign.
We did. You're not supposed to say that out loud and on television.
And does it give areas for improvement? I mean,
It does. It does
okay.
have recommendations, one of which is for the city of Urbana to adopt a complete streets policy, which we're doing simultaneously, but actually several of their recommendations we are already in the process of doing. And then there's some specific recommendations, then there's some more general recommendations, and then there are recommendations that each community should do, and then there are recommendations for each of the projects, how they could be improved, each of the street segments that were looked at.
Okay.
I'd just like to point out, some of the roads that they looked at were last updated over or close to 10 years ago. and so they don't have the Complete Streets guidelines behind them. So it's an interesting collection, and you can really see the change over time.
Yeah, you look at the dates, and the ones that are within the last couple of years are at the top, and the ones that are not are right at the bottom.
And
of the
does it
list.
cover, I mean, I assume it covers like IDOT jurisdiction, like
There are a
University
couple.
Avenue, which is, I think, a real trouble as a pedestrian to cross.
It does not by any stretch cover the entire
Okay.
of both cities. It just
Okay.
picked certain projects, certain road
Okay.
segments, and looked at those. But there are a couple of IDOT pieces.
Okay.
There's a Savoy piece, isn't there?
I was just saying, it's like a dozen of them.
I think it's 13.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that'll be
So it's
great
quite
to look
limited.
at.
But it's very interesting. And then the last two, were just announcements.
Yeah,
I don't know
go
if you want
ahead.
to go on. So October 5th is Walk and Roll School Today. Walk and Roll to School Day. And so that is a day when we have our public celebrities such as yourselves go out to the schools and encourage the elementary students to walk or bicycle to school. And this is really spearheaded by the CU Safe Routes to School project, and they encourage all of the schools to have the buses, for example, drop the kids off a block or so away from the school, and then they all walk together. Some of the schools do different things, more encouraging things, encourage the students to create a pedestrian bus, a walking bus to school, and so on. And if you're interested in going out to one of our schools here in Urbana, you can let me know. I can connect you with the people that are organizing that. Or if you have her email address, Cynthia Hoyle or Rose Hudson of CU Safe Routes to School project. They're actually doing the organizing, and that is October 5th, so it's coming up pretty soon. I know that Gary is going to Leal School, and the mayor, for example, will be going to one of our schools, Diane Marlin, Charlie Smythe, and so on, our council members. And the last thing is an event on October 8th, which is called Obstacle Mobstacle, and that is at Centennial Park on Saturday, October 8th at 9 a.m. There will be a bicycle safety clinic, which it will include a bicycle rodeo. But there are also other events. It's a 2-mile fitness challenge course with obstacles. So you join in a mob, 4 people together in a mob, and then you complete an obstacle course. So obstacle, mobstacle. And you can find more information about that at the Champaign Park District website. And the contact information, there is no telephone number on here, just an email address if you would like more information. The email address to contact is megan.kuhlenschmidt, quite long, at cparkdistrict.com. So that's Champaign, cparkdistrict.com. Or you can just look at the Champaign Park District website, and I'm sure there's a link on that.
Any other announcements?
Is this where we were going to talk about future topics, or is it a different?
Yeah,
item?
that's next. So future meeting topics. The roundabouts one was the. You can still do an announcement. Go ahead.
Yeah, just to mention that the Cycling Savvy course is happening this weekend, and 9-hour road cycling courses, maybe 3 spots open for the Friday night classroom thing, and maybe 1 for the other thing. I know Rebecca signed up, and Morgan for part of it. Oh, okay. Well, she did sign up, but anyway.
2 slots available.
And Mashana. So anyway, if you're interested in that, and I'm doing that with Carl Stewart, just look up cyclingsavvy.org and search Illinois, and there's information on that. That's this
Great.
weekend.
Okay, any other announcements, upcoming events? So future meeting topics, the roundabout question was one. So Gary, do you want to give us the synopsis of sort of what the committee could take on?
Yeah, well, I guess the question was, first of all, do we want to look at this and make recommendation or not? I mean, that would just be the initial question. And then if we figure that we should look into it, then it would be to look into it and then come up with some type of a recommendation. But the studies have been submitted for Windsor, Race, and Florida Philo. And I think they're going to be substantially revised for some reasons, but that's sort of another thing. And so I think roundabouts are one of the most effective type of infrastructure that's come about. I mean, if you can reduce serious and fatal crashes by 80 to 90%, I mean, that's really quite remarkable. And for pedestrians and bicyclists, they have some real advantages. We have about 1,400 roundabouts in the U.S. now. That's over 11,000 roundabout years. You multiply all the roundabouts by how many years that they've been operating. So that's a long time from that perspective. There has not been a single pedestrian fatality reported. The consultant who reported said he could count the pedestrian crashes on one hand, I think he said. Not a single bicyclist fatality. It really is quite amazing. And the ones being put in the U.S. are, many ways better than what they have in Europe, because they have them in Europe for, last 40 years. So we're way, way behind, but at least we can leapfrog to the latest technology. So I think it's something that makes sense for us to look at and provide, be educated about them, to look at the report. I'm prepared to, summarize the reports and do whatever I need. And so the thing is, do we want to be involved in it is just the question.
Okay, I see some nodding heads. Yes,
I
Morgan?
understand the big concern was about the pedestrian interaction at some of these original locations that were studied. And so it definitely is something that this group should be reviewing and discussing, understanding, and giving some input to.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the most complicated concerns was specifically about pedestrians who might have a visual impairment, and how they would use a roundabout, and it gets very complicated, and I'm still just trying to educate myself personally, but about how single and multi-lane roundabouts are navigated by people who might be blind or have some visual impairment, and how you best have to build a roundabout, or whether it needs a hawk or a push-button signal or other kinds of signalization or not. And there's a variety of opinions, and it seems to be a cutting-edge thing that if people want to sink their teeth into as a commission, it would be great to educate ourselves about this and make some kind of helpful recommendation as the city considers when and whether and how and where to implement roundabouts. Is there anybody who feels otherwise, or is everybody okay if we put this on for a future meeting? And we have a detailed study we can send out. It'll come to you as a PDF that's lengthy, that explains from an outside roundabout consultant what their findings were for a couple different intersections. So, okay, I think that's a yes. Yeah, I think we can send out a link to it then and let people, because it's a pretty big file. I don't know if it'll come right through email, but we'll make sure people get a link. Gary?
As I mentioned, I think those reports are going to have to be substantially changed according to some things I found. So you may want to dig into them now, but some of the numbers may switch around quite a bit.
Rebecca?
It might also be useful to take a look at the minutes from the city council meeting where that was presented. There was a lot of public testimony given that night, a lot of comments that, well, actually, I don't know, the city council doesn't do minutes at that level. If you watch the video of the council meeting for the public input, really it was very instructive. You'd learn something that is not in the report. We can send you the date of that. I don't know off the top of my head, but we can send you the date.
August 22nd.
So if you go to the www.urbana-illinois website and go to the government tab and then to city council, and August 22nd, you said? And then you should be able to play the video of public input. The videos are divided into what the topic is. So public input, and then also the roundabout section. There was more input.
Great. Any other future meeting topics that people would like us to consider? Morgan?
I just don't know how we're going to move forward with addressing Matthews Avenue for the University District and Urbana Bike Plan. So I don't know if that's something that could really be considered something to put as a topic, but it doesn't have a process for resolving it right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Just throw it out there.
Are there still meetings or conversations happening, or is CATS or any other committee in charge of the details of Matthews?
The CATS task force about the campus, or the university district bike plan, really was working under the principle of, when it comes down to a decision about any particular roadway or off-road, any right-of-way, it would really be under the responsibility of the jurisdiction responsible for that area, right?
Mhm.
So we ended up making the Urbana jurisdiction areas essentially match the Urbana bike plan, with the exception of Florida, where it said it would go behind to the south of the President's house, and Green Street, where we are seeking approval to do a bus bike lane, and then Matthews. Plus, there's 2 Urbana streets involved in that. How do you get from Matthews to Goodwin? And so that really kind of goes back to Urbana, but maybe in coordination with the university, because we've had a lot of discussions about Matthews as a partnership. And so I think it's something that we need to identify how we want to resolve it.
Mm-hmm.
It's my interpretation.
There
Yeah.
are a lot of issues surrounding Matthews Avenue that have nothing to do with bicycle, pedestrian, traffic circulation, and so on. There are a lot of other issues that would need to be resolved before something like this body could actually look at what recommendations would make sense. But maybe a suggestion from, maybe I can take it, the fact that that was raised here to people, and maybe that would push people to work on resolving the other
Yeah.
aspects of it.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right, if the issue did come here, we don't need to get into those. We don't need to get into topics other than bike and ped safety.
Mm-hmm.
But if the issue did ever come here, if there are different options, if Urbana has presented one proposal of how Matthews should look, and the U of I has presented a counter proposal of how Matthews should physically and operationally and safety-wise, how Matthews should be, we could certainly look at options or weigh in on it or something if such a thing exists. But you're right, if there are totally other issues like revenue and parking, and that's not this
Yeah.
committee's
Yeah.
job to get into. I mean, those are just issues that have to be worked out between all the entities. But if there are really open questions about how should Matthews be designed and how can Matthews be safe, if there's a way for that portion of the topic to come to this committee and for us to add any valuable input, I think we'd be glad to. It's an important corridor.
Yeah, I think the only design suggestion we got was actually from Gary 3 or 4 years ago now, talking about, right now there's a bidirectional path that veers back and forth if you go all the way from Nevada to University. It doesn't go all the way to University, but Nevada to Springfield. And there's he had recommended, back in diagonal parking, so reverse diagonal parking on one side, and then a facility for the bikes on the other side. I think the concept of what we'd like to see for bicyclists is that's what I was talking about, so that it can play into all the decisions about the storm sewer needs and the parking revenues and the ownership and all of that. I just was thinking that we could potentially come up with some idea of what we'd like to see in terms of the bikes and the pedestrians, with the ability for cars to still be there. Maybe it's 2 options, or maybe it's just something that we need to work on outside of this and then get your feedback on. I agree.
Yeah. Let's, run that up the flagpole or whatever and just see when it makes sense to come here and how we could best add value. Okay. Any other future topics that you all want to put on our radar? Hearing none. We're always open for future suggestions if you come up with things later. That is it for tonight's agenda. So I'll declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much.